Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diana Gugliata, and I'm the Senior Manager of Public Affairs here at AAA Northeast. I am actually wearing two hats today because I'm also representing the transportation work group for a very dynamic coalition called Age Friendly Rhode Island. Today, I have the pleasure of serving as your moderator for a conversation on a topic I am extremely passionate about, transportation equity for older adults. I can't think of a better group of people to have this conversation with. We almost didn't even make it here because we were having our own conversation behind the scenes before this, and we could talk all day, but very passionate individuals. And I want to start by introducing you to Catherine Taylor. She's the Executive Director of Age Friendly Rhode Island. And Catherine is certainly a policy expert, particularly in the area of aging and dementia policy. She's been a loyal and powerful advocate in our state for older adults and citizens with disabilities. I met Catherine a few years back when she was in her most recent position before this. She was serving as the Senior Advisor for Policy, Partnerships, and Community Engagement at the George and Ann Ryan Institute for Neuroscience and the Rhode Island Geriatric Education Center at URI. She's a commissioner on the Rhode Island Governor's Commission on Disabilities and a member of the Board of Directors of the National Association for Geriatric Education. But you might know her as the former director of the Rhode Island Department of Elderly Affairs, now known as the Office of Healthy Aging. That was a new 2019 change, I think, in the name. Rose Jones took that role on, and she's doing a great job. And we're also joined by Scott Avedisian. Scott is the CEO of the Rhode Island Public Transit Authority. If you're a Rhode Islander, you know we just say RIPTA. Scott joined RIPTA 2.5 years ago after serving as the mayor of the city of Warwick for 18 years and also serving for 4 years as the chairman of RIPTA's board of directors. So Scott is extremely passionate about public service. He is truly a champion in the area of public transportation in our state. He values its impact on our businesses, on our environment, and on our citizens. And last but not least, you'll see on your screen Mary Lou Moran, who is the director of the Leon Matthews Senior Center and Pawtucket Division of Senior Services. She's been there almost 2 decades now, and she's a very active member of the Rhode Island Senior Center Directors Association, having served both as president and vice president. She represents numerous healthy aging initiatives here in Rhode Island, including the Long-Term Care Coordinating Council, our Age Friendly Rhode Island Coalition, where she co-chairs the Civic and Social Engagement Subcommittee. And she's very active with the Pawtucket and Central Falls Homeless Coalition, Rhode Island Elderly Minority Task Force. Amazing to me. I call her the patron saint of senior services now. She's also very active with the Health Equity Zone Collaborative for Pawtucket and Central Falls. So just to start off, in full transparency, everyone, I want to let you know that I'm hopeful that this will be the first in a series of conversations on this topic of equity in transportation. Had COVID not changed all of our lives, this day was originally planned as an in-person summit at the Providence Marriott, where we would have been discussing the findings from a campaign we were calling Transportation Challenge 2020. And that plan was to get people from all walks of life across the state to ride public transit for a week, or at least a week, as much as their schedule would allow, and fill out an electronic survey via cell phone, laptop, whatever they had, to record their experiences and try to see how that transportation experience or those experiences might differ if they were an older adult or a disabled person with physical challenge. You know, it's not everyone that can just hop into their car and drive to their destination. So we wanted to encourage public administrators to do the same. And ironically, Scott was just telling us before our webinar how as soon as he came on board at RIPTA, he jumped on the paratransit vans and wanted to experience that firsthand. So that's exactly what we're talking about. So we were, you know, hoping for that, but we're going to hold on to that hope. We still plan to call people to action and have them take part in those experiences. But we'll put that on hold till we go back to a little bit of a more normal way of life. But I'm hopeful that today our conversation can begin about transportation for older adults here in Rhode Island. And, you know, at AAA, we've been offering free driver improvement classes for older adults for many years. We often come into conversations with those individuals or with their families about the policy processes. You know, when an older adult in their family is showing signs of cognitive or physical decline that hinder their ability to drive safely. And about 10 years ago, a bill was brought before the Massachusetts legislature to mandate a road test for drivers 75 and older. And that bill sparked a huge uptick in calls into our AAA offices. Certainly lots of attention from the media as well. But we focused more closely at that point on how we could help people, help families and individuals learn more about driver evaluations and what mobilities, you know, what options exist in their local communities and statewide for someone with a disability. So we ended up developing an online resource, which is AAA.com/key timing. And that was developed really to help families navigate the challenges of what we call driving retirement and learn more about mobility options. So I'm going to open it up by asking Catherine just to comment about our DMV's Medical Advisory Board's role in testing drivers. You know, law enforcement and physicians usually make those referrals, but what happens when a family member is concerned?
Thank you so much for that question, Diana. I'm so glad we're starting this, because I don't think that there is a speech that I've given in the last, decade about transportation or even ethics that someone in the audience hasn't said, I'm really worried about my older father and mother. How do I know it's time to take away the keys? And, that's just not really the question. I know family members are often have a lot of concerns about whether their parents are safe to drive and whether they might get lost or cause an accident. But it's a really difficult conversation to have between a parent and child. And it's one that actually a family need not have, because the DMV is perfectly happy to be the bad guy. And so it's possible for family to reach out to the medical review board at the DMV, and the mechanics are you do that in writing and you detail your concerns and ask for an objective view of the older adult's fitness to drive, because as the child you're not objective, you're very caught up emotionally in the well-being of your parents, and also wonder about your own role in protecting them. So the operator control section of the DMV will then contact the driver for an in-person interview about their medical condition, and will provide medical forms for the physician to fill out. And if the report is favorable, then the older driver will be given a road test. And if they pass, great, you're on the road. And if they fail, or if they don't turn in the medical forms, then their license is suspended until they can do those things. And a driver's license for all of us, but particularly as we get older, it represents freedom and independence, control to those of us who have a license. And giving it up is really just a terrible thing to contemplate. But sometimes, because of diminishing eyesight or mobility or onset of dementia, it's necessary. But two things are really important to keep in mind when we talk about that. First, having the DMV being the neutral arbiter of whether it's safe for the person to be behind the wheel just removes that adult-child and older parent dynamic, which can be really tough, especially because adult children can sometimes err on the overprotective side, or even have a bias that there's a certain age cutoff that everyone should stop driving, and that's not true. And I know AAA has wonderful programs to help drivers who are encountering limited mobility, improve their safety as drivers. So that's really important to think about. And then on the other hand, it's absolutely essential, and we're gonna, the whole conversation is gonna be about this, but when you do have to take the keys away, you have got to have a mobility plan in place to take the place of the car, so that person can still go where he or she wants to go, not just where they need to go, but where they want to go. This is just such a great segue to the whole conversation of transportation equity.
Diana, we can't hear you.
Oh, okay. I think I'm back. Okay, thank you. No, Catherine, that's exactly why you can find that that plan or a kind of a template to plan for mobility on that website. It's aaa.com/key timing, but thank you so much for mentioning that, because it does take a good deal of work. And we have to think of driving as a privilege, not a right. You know, the state has the ability to revoke someone's driver's license in the interest of public safety, but transportation, particularly the use of public transportation, is a civil right. That was established with the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. So, you know, it's interesting, Catherine, would you agree that many people don't necessarily consider public transportation a civil rights issue until they're faced with a disability or reach a point in life where they can no longer drive safely?
Yes, I think that's exactly true. I think as long as you do have that ability to come and go on wheels as you please, it's not something that most of us give any thought to. But it is a civil right. And as I said before, it's not just going where you need to go, but where you want to go. And I like to think, you know, as we frame the transportation equity conversation of the ice cream cone test. And I think this is just a great way to think about it. I probably heard it from you to begin with. But that means that, you know, think of it as a perfect 10 Rhode Island summer day. And it's just hot and beautiful, and all you want in the world is an ice cream cone. If you're able to just go to an ice cream parlor and get that ice cream cone and satisfy your craving wherever the ice cream parlor happens to be, then you have the right transportation options to give you the right quality of life. And the transportation that you deserve. And I think it's also important that we think of transportation or really understand it as a social determinant of health. I mean, people they need to be able to travel to doctor's appointments, yes, but also to the grocery store and the barber and the movies and to their grandchildren's ball games and plays. And that's what keeps people truly healthy in every way. It's also the path into or out of social isolation, which is another critical social determinant of health.
Absolutely. So it's so interesting. You know, the Office of Civil Rights is responsible for ensuring public transit providers comply with all these non-discrimination requirements. There's training around Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the Americans with Disabilities Act, but these have little to do with the ice cream test. You know, that is a test of true equity and quality of life, like you said, and it reaches far beyond compliance. So in my opinion, the design of transportation, systems should focus on satisfaction, customer satisfaction, but to achieve that level of equity, we definitely need neighbors and more local data-driven programs to supplement state-funded transit. So for everyone in the audience, Scott, Catherine, and Mary Lou are very much policy experts. For those of you that are participating that are not policy analysts by trade, I'd like to just mention there's two ways that we really evaluate equity when we look at transportation policy. So horizontal equity looks at fairness in the distribution of services, right, between citizens or groups that are considered equal. And according to that definition, equal individuals and groups should receive kind of, equal shares of resources. Everyone should be treated the same. So for example, we are all aging. Each of us, if we are lucky, we are all aging. And we'll all reach an age, hopefully, where our physical and cognitive abilities might not be so great for driving or for even walking a few miles to a bus stop. That might become difficult over time. So, aging does not discriminate on sex, income, race, or geography. So we look at it from that perspective, but then we can also look at vertical equity and the distribution of services through the lens of social and environmental justice. So here we are looking at the impacts between individuals that differ in their needs for transportation because of income or social class, because of disabilities. And by this definition, policies are equitable if they compensate for overall inequities. So a good example of that would be like the reduced fare bus pass program for low-income individuals, right? So, oftentimes these different types of equity overlap, they conflict. So it's always a challenge with transportation planning to make trade-offs between different equity objectives. And, looking at disability, like we said, another example is RIPTA's RIDE program. And that's what Scott was mentioning. He, went right in and jumped on that bus. Under those, that is an ADA compliant program. So under those compliance laws, service is offered within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route bus stop. And Scott, if I say anything incorrectly, just
you're doing fine.
But, if you're living in rural Gloucester, for example, service isn't available because RIPTA's fixed route service doesn't run there. And frankly, with 180 citizens per square mile in Gloucester, that makes good sense from a policy perspective, right? Although it might sound harsh in terms of horizontal equity, because an individual's disability doesn't care if we live in the city or in the country. But the fact is, public transportation cannot be all things to all people. There have to be trade-offs. So, Catherine, could you kind of give us the lay of the land here in Rhode Island about the different transportation policies and programs for our older adults and disabled citizens?
Sure, I'll tick through them really quickly. First of all, as you mentioned, there is RIPTA's RIDE program, and that's for individuals of any age who have a disability that prevents them from riding a fixed route bus. And the cost of that is $4 each way for a trip. It's interesting to note that only about 30% of RIDE riders are older adults. That's people 60 and over for the purposes of this program. The majority are adults with disabilities. RIPTA also offers a reduced fare bus pass for low-income seniors, and that is for folks age 65 and over, and for individuals of disabilities. RIPTA finally also offers a flex service for folks, it's a van, in areas of the state that have little or no fixed bus service, and that cost is the same as a regular bus fare. And finally, there's the non-emergency medical transportation that the Executive Office of Health and Human Services offers for Rhode Islanders. Under that, the vendor there is MTM, and that will probably be familiar to a lot of people listening in on that call. The elderly transportation program provides the non-emergency medical transportation for 5 purposes only for individuals who are over 60, and that's to medical appointments, kidney dialysis, cancer treatment, senior cafe meal sites, and insight to the blind. Oh, sorry, and also adult day. Sorry, I forgot to mention that too. And the cost is $2 each way for that, and reservations are required, so you have to know what your schedule is going to be. That is a dizzying array of options that overlap a little bit and sometimes don't, and they have all different eligibility requirements. So my advice to Rhode Islanders to figure that out is to keep this resource in mind and fix this phone number in your memory. Anybody who's listened to me talk for 10 years knows that I will always say this, is remember 462-4444. That's the point, and that is the starting point for any question. So if RIPTA is confusing, or elderly transportation is confusing, or you just need to know where to start, call the point. I'll say it again: 462-4444.
Perfect. And it does. That's, such a great resource to everyone. One thing I want to mention, one of the factors that we looked at here at AAA in our examination of equity was the cost of vehicle ownership. So we reevaluate this every year. And basically, in a nutshell, if you're spending more than 15% of your annual income on transportation, that's a problem. Okay, so our methodology included an evaluation sort of based on the mean household income by city or town here in Rhode Island and the average cost of personal vehicle operation. So this year we calculated personal vehicle ownership, the average is $9,282. When we looked at each municipality in Rhode Island, there are certainly communities where this percentage exceeds that 15% for a median household income. Central Falls, East Providence, Johnston, North Providence, I won't go through the whole list, but when we look at those communities, and by the way, I will have a full report available through our website in just a bit. But those are communities that should certainly start looking at the need to evaluate whether their citizens are using public transportation. It's much more economical than personal vehicle ownership. And they just have to get to the point where they're comfortable using it. that's important for both horizontal and vertical equity. So, you know, we have to consider though the loss of income in one's senior years. That's critical. So Catherine and I were talking the other day about the average Social Security check for a Rhode Islander. It's $1,500.68 a month. That comes to about $18,700 a year. And that means that if Social Security benefits are your sole source of income, we know, by the way, that this is the case for about 60% of older adults in Rhode Island right now. Vehicle ownership is nearly impossible. It would represent 50% of their annual income. And Rhode Island is one of the 13 states that taxes Social Security. I just had to throw that in there. Catherine's passionate about that too. It's important though to take note of the cost of transportation by mode and by age group. So, you know, let's consider those communities where citizens might have a more difficult time maintaining their own personal vehicle past retirement. In those communities, and I do have that complete list if you're interested, RIPTA does provide service in all of those communities, but it's important that, like I said, the older adults feel comfortable from an operational standpoint, they feel safe and secure, and also the walkability of their community plays into this. So each city and town has a walkability score. It ranges from 0 to 100. We've recently reviewed that data, and it's also available on Age Friendly's website, which is agefriendlyri.org. That evaluation was done, by the way, by Tufts. It's in their health aging data report. So we do need to consider those older adults who've never used public transit before. And interestingly enough, the Federal Transit Administration grants $270 million each year to fund programs that foster transportation equity. And travel training is one of those programs. RIPTA does a great job, and I've actually attended a RIPTA session myself. Literally teaches you how to, you have too, Catherine, yeah, how to ride the bus. And I'm sure Mary Lou has sat through quite a few. And, you know, I guess my only takeaway was, oh God, we could have used 5 additional translators probably in the group that I sat in on. That's not always possible, but it was so informative. And, you know, we've taken that deeper look, I think, and I guess my hope is that public administrators across the board will, you know, drive those programs into their communities. So
nice pun, Diana.
Yeah, so I do want to mention, as of now, and we're living through tricky times right now, everybody, but Central Falls, Johnston, Woonsocket, Portsmouth, North Smithfield, and West Greenwich do not have transportation programs for seniors running right now. Providence is working really hard to reinstate this service. And when we look at communities that need it the most, I'm just going to have our panel of experts comment here. What are the biggest impediments to offering transportation within a city or town? And whoever wants to go first can raise their hand on that one.
Yeah, I just make a sentence or two before we really turn it over to the experts. But, you know, my experience is that throughout the state, many mayors and town managers, if not most, I mean, some really shine, but most really do recognize how important this is and would like to make it a priority. But and especially now, municipal budgets are so strapped, and the human resources just aren't there. It's very difficult to find drivers. So those are real impediments. I think, you know, Scott and Mary Lou can add a lot more to that.
Mary Lou, do you want to go first?
Yeah, you know, it's a lot around budget, you know, and I'm fortunate. I'm in a town of Pawtucket, that city of Pawtucket, that the city administration has been so supportive of senior services in general, and also transportation services. And, you know, in my earlier conversation with Deanna, I was saying that really nutrition and transportation, dating way back, like 35 years since we've been around, those were the two key components of the services that we offered. And the funding, a lot of the funding initially came from community development block grants to the city. And, you know, over the years, that funding has also dried up. And so the city has, you know, gotten more and more, you know, I've had to get more committed to funding the program. But I mean, it's such a necessity. And, you know, for those who don't drive, even to get to a market, it's not close by. And so just the basic needs of being able to get to various stores, and not even looking at medical appointments and everything, it's a challenge. And you know, with having to require that the drivers have a CDL with passenger endorsement, I mean, it's just it becomes. We'd love to have, you know, and we have 2 vehicles on the road. We have 2 drivers. One of the drivers has been with us for 35 years, you know. So, I mean, at some point in time, we're going to need to replenish, you know, the personnel. And it's very difficult. But, you know, I'm fortunate. My mayor, Mayor Grebian, has been so committed to the, you know, to that part of what we offer.
Right, as was former Mayor Abedisian. So the Transwic program is like a gold standard. I've been there to personally speak to the older adults at the senior center, and they absolutely love the Transwic program. And so many of their comments were about what Mary Lou just said about the drivers themselves. And you know, I see that a lot of people sort of get stuck when they need that door-to-door or almost door-through-door service. And we're talking about like bending the rules just a little bit, where a lot of those drivers, they grow to have wonderful relationships with the seniors, and they will take those extra steps that absolutely mean the world to those people. But Scott, did you have any comments about why it's so much harder in some communities than others?
Well, I think both Mary Lou and Catherine, you know, hit the nail on the head. It all comes down to resources. But first of all, let me say, Diana, thank you for inviting RIPTA to be part of this. It is a pleasure to work with Mary Lou again, who I've met in the last 2 years through some programming that we're helping with in Pawtucket. And my longtime friend, I won't say old friend, my longtime friend, Catherine Taylor, I think we've probably known one another for 30 years. So it's good to be back with both of them. But it is resources. It's also at this moment, we're having a driver shortage. We are not getting qualified candidates to come through the door to apply for driver positions. So that's also a little bit of an impediment at the moment. There's, you know, the cost of all the vehicles, there's the cost of the maintenance. Many cities and towns don't want to take a new project on. So I remember Mayor Fung and I were talking at one point of how we could combine the 2 programs between Cranston and Warwick, and that was just became a logistical nightmare of all the different union considerations and who couldn't work here and who couldn't work there. It was easier to just continue to have the 2 separate programs, but there are some things that we can do. And so we received some Federal Transit Administration grant money that we were able, thanks to Senator Reed, who went out to fight for that money. And we were able to partner with 5 communities. Mary Lou is one of them, to say, we'll buy you new vans. So if we can't offer the service, there's maybe a way that we can help people provide the service by offering the vehicle. We also donate old vehicles to agencies. I will tell you.
And we've been happy to receive older vehicles that have been taken off the road.
But sometimes the older vehicles are very short term. You know, it's tough when there's
still it can help get through a difficult time, you know, right. and it's good to have another vehicle that, you know, if one of your better vehicles breaks down, at least right. You've got something to be able to transport people.
So one of the things that we've proposed in using our CARES Act funding that we got post-COVID is to continue the municipal van program and reach out to other communities. We are partnering with the town of Foster that doesn't have good service, RIPTA service. We are partnering with them because they have a town employee that they will train, and we can, if we provide the van, now we've reached another community, and we've brought the opportunity to seniors in those communities to be able to go and do things that they currently can't do. But I think when we talk about there needs to be a coordinated system, and what I can't figure my way through is there's so many opportunities for people to get transit, whether it be through Buddha, whether it's through Office of Healthy Aging, through RIPTA, through your local senior center or your community center, maybe after school programming. There really needs to be some kind of an umbrella that pulls everyone together, because it is one of the things that's difficult is if we go, say, to the Warwick Senior Center, just to, not to pick on Meg, but just to use her as an example. When you see all the different modes of transportation that can take somebody there, and they're all in the parking lot at the same time, there's got to be a way, that that's better streamlined, so that Mary Lou doesn't have 5 vans dropping someone off, that's better coordinated so that we can make things work differently. So on our paratransit side, we group trips together so that we know someone might be going to the Trudeau Center. They might have, of course, right now, we can only have 4 passengers in a paratransit van, but at one point you could have had 16. So we try to group all those trips together so that we're not having people back, double back on where they've already traveled, and to be able to do that much more efficiently and effectively. But I think the biggest issue, as both Mary Lou and Catherine said, is it's really the resources. And in some communities, there may not even be a senior center. And so there's, so then you've got to really try to create, where are you going, and trying to find out where people want to go to is one of the more difficult parts of the problem here, because we think we know where people want to go, and sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong. But surveying, individuals to find out what are the real needs. And, yes, there are some have-to-haves, doctor's appointments, grocery store, but then there's some really nice-to-haves, like going to visit your grandchildren on your own and not needing to have one of your kids come pick you up to take you there. And different opportunities like that. There's got to be a way that we can coordinate all the different parts of the system differently and more efficiently.
It's interesting that you say that, Scott, because part of our evaluation was looking at communities with higher percentages of folks 65 and older, and then higher percentages of individuals with disabilities. And when we kind of laid those on top of each other and looked at those that also had transportation programs that served both vulnerable populations, there were many that did, but also those that did not do that were really different in their policy. And I'm thinking of, in particular, Narragansett and Westerly restricted it to senior residents only. And I was kind of like, let's dig deeper here. Is it an equipment issue? Does the van not have a lift, or administrators just not talking to each other? Is it a lack of coordination? So interesting to do a little bit of more research on that, and like you said, coordinate a little bit further. So I don't want to miss the opportunity to talk about COVID, because just to call into the senior center directors, Mary Lou, and kind of chat and have conversations in different cities and towns and see how everyone is pivoting. What have you seen as the best solutions? Catherine, I know we've met with many, and many are using this opportunity to deliver meals.
Right.
Are there some other solutions that you've seen that are working really well?
Right. Well, so much of transportation kind of ended because it took a long time to figure out how to do it safely. And as Mary Lou was saying, you can take just fewer people around because you can't have as many people on a van. So bringing things to people rather than people to places has been where a lot of the work has gone. But But volunteers have really stepped up too. And in a lot of places in our state, this has been going on pre-COVID, but it's really important post-COVID too, because, even things like ride-hailing services, people may not feel as secure about who the stranger is driving them. So, I just like to mention, the villages, which are communities of mutual support that exist in Providence and Barrington and the Edgewood section of Cranston, and they're growing in many other areas around the state that offer volunteer drivers as part of being a member of the village. And those trips could be to anywhere, depending on your community. So again, from doctor's appointments to grandchildren. The Village Common, which is the umbrella organization of the villages that sort of supports them with all the back office work and organization, has a wonderful partnership right now with the town of Burrowville to try to pilot a rural Northwest Rhode Island volunteer transportation. And then finally, this conversation would not be complete without mentioning Southern Rhode Island volunteers, which have been around for 20 years, providing volunteer, completely unpaid transportation to older adults throughout South County and in East and West Greenwich for basic needs such as medical appointments, but also grocery shopping and trips to food pantries and housing appointments. So a little bit broader scope than elderly transportation, and a little bit more responsive, and of course volunteer and free. So that's really filling in a gap as well.
Absolutely. And these grassroots initiatives are so critical. I don't know if everyone realized, Scott certainly realizes this, but according to the Government Accountability Office, paratransit transportation, like the RIDE program, is 81% more expensive per passenger than fixed route service. And so, these supplemental programs are just so critical. So really shout out to the great municipalities that are doing this well, like Cranston and Warwick and Smithfield and East Providence and Pawtucket. Mary Lou, did you have anything else you wanted to add in terms of Pawtucket's secrets, what they're doing that is so wonderful? And I know you worked in tandem and you've been working with the Health Equity Zone Collaborative. And they've really elevated the importance of transportation recently.
Right. And, I think especially during COVID, we have realized how important staying connected is. And transportation has really offered such a way for us to maintain that connection with the seniors. And we are out there delivering over 125 meals every day to folks in the community, but it's so much more than even the nutrition part of it. It's that interaction. And I said that might be the only person that they saw that day. And we even were able to, and I know Meals on Wheels finds this too, that we were able to avert at least 6 times someone who the situation could have turned into a much different outcome, because they didn't come to the door to get their meal, or the meal was still there from the previous day, because we were having to do all of the contact, as contactless free as possible. And it's really been an I guess I always knew it, but this has really been an eye opener. And it is a form of health. And I'm so happy that the Health Equity Zone and LISC has viewed this as a form of health.
Absolutely. And that's, 6 lives that were impacted for the better in just one city alone. What was interesting to me when I was doing some research in this area is the way we measure satisfaction with senior transportation. I found it really interesting that, you know, for seniors, there are different dimensions of service that are important to them. And what ranked first was the relationship that they have with those drivers. And I know we've been over this, but in all the 11 dimensions of service, that is the absolute paramount to an older adult, and especially the vulnerable ones that are homebound. So I think it's just really, really important to mention that. You know, one of the other things that they rank highly, obviously cleanliness, safety and security, and on-time service for the return trip. They don't mind if the driver's a little late picking them up, but they're so worried about being stranded. And, you know, one of the things that I was trying to do out in some senior centers, the ones that were using Ride, was kind of, you know, just remind them about the Ride app, because a lot of them had smartphones, but they hadn't really worked within the Ride app as much. And Catherine, you've mentioned about, you know, learning so much, and Age Friendly Rhode Island has done a lot around technology training, especially during COVID. So I think that's really a solution. And in just a minute, I'm going to let Scott talk about all the wonderful work that RIPTA has done around technology. But Catherine, if you could just share a little bit about all the projects that you've been working on that are technology related.
Well, I'm not so sure the projects are so much important to mention now than the sort of the philosophy behind them. Because so much of what's going on now that we're in the pandemic, I mean, here we all are on webinar and video chat having this great forum. This is where life is taking place right now. And so one of the other huge disparities that COVID has just laid bare for us to see is the huge digital divide between older adults and everybody else, you know, across income levels. Older in geography, older adults are significantly less likely, for a host of different reasons, to have access to the internet, to have access to devices such as computers or tablets or smartphones, and to have the skills or the confidence or the tech help to really be able to take advantage of all the apps and the tools that are available to us as we plan our travel, and that are just being fine-tuned, and you know, new things developed every day that are wonderful. So you know, I have to give a shout out to like programs like that you ran, Diana, that it's uber easy to get a Lyft pre-COVID, was so fantastic in helping older adults kind of demystify ride-hailing services, and that's going to be so important to bring back when we get through all this. But as we advocate for transportation equity, we have to just be advocating with just as loud a voice for digital inclusion for older adults, so that transportation equity can happen.
Amen. And Scott, do you want to take us through some
I
of the
agree with
that around technology? Oh, I'm sorry.
Sure. So I'm glad that Catherine talked about the help of getting people the help to get to the technology. What we have just rolled out is a brand new Wave app. And the Wave app, I think, brings equity to people in many different ways. One, it's downloadable. And so you can have a regular card, or you can put it on a smartphone. So it's giving people different options instead of everybody all doing the same thing. Right now, if you have a bus pass that you purchase and you lose that bus pass, we have no proof that you ever bought that bus pass. It's not registered to you. It's not anywhere that we can go and look and say, okay, yep, there's still value on this card. We can replace it. With the new Wave app, you can download everything in the cloud, and this is when, once senior centers are back to full capacity, we'll be sending our team out to do training so that they can help their clients make sure that they are downloading their card. So whether it's a free pass or whether it's one they purchase, get it downloaded so we can then go and know that there's ownership there, and that you have that. And if you can't find that card, we can give you that value. You can also do where it's downloadable, so that if Catherine wants to put money on her elderly next door neighbor's card, because it's Mother's Day, she can do that, and she can do it just by having the code and putting that money into the card. And if you are someone who gets different products through different state agencies, all of those different benefits would get downloaded onto your card so that you're not using individual tickets to go somewhere and you're not having to try to figure out where you are. But more importantly for us is it gives us an opportunity to do cards that will be sold when you go into a CVS or a supermarket and you see that big list, that big pegboard of all the different gift cards that you can buy. There will now be a Wave card there from RIPTA where you can download it right there. And so now you've got the opportunity that if you don't have a computer, you can still get your own card, but you can register it. And so you still keep that value. But I think where the equity point for us comes in is we've been trying for a long time to figure out what we do if you don't have a free bus pass and you're not in the free or reduced fare program and you're buying a pass. We're trying to figure out what we do with the fact that I may not have $70 on the 28th of the month to buy my next month's bus pass. And so I might have to buy a weekly pass or day passes or whatever and end up spending more for my monthly trips because I can't afford the $70 to begin with. So with the new Wave technology, once you've registered your card, you buy a week pass at the beginning of the month. And so it's a little more than you would have spent based on a full week's worth of service based on the $70 per month. But the next week you have the money where you put more on. And by the end of the month, by the time you hit $70, you'll ride the rest of the month for free. So we have figured out a way to bring some equity into that system so that people who don't have the resources at the beginning of the month don't end up having to pay more for the service that they are receiving. And to me, that's a way that we're going to be able to really show an equitable and fair system all the way across the board. Now, just very quickly, I want to touch on one of the comments that Catherine and Mary Lou made about COVID. And just to give a shout out to our drivers, our paratransit drivers, we didn't close any service. We kept everyone working. We closed down no routes. So our paratransit drivers, because senior centers weren't open and Buddha centers weren't open, they took on all sorts of different roles that weren't what paratransit drivers would have done. They delivered Meals on Wheels. They delivered meals for the Office of Healthy Aging. They delivered care packages for family service, and Margaret Holland McDuff, grateful for the fact that we had so many people who are out there. But then I want you to know that they also, currently, we provide service to people who are going to the new Honeywell plant in Smithfield to make the KN95 masks. And we saw that as a role that we could fill to help everybody in the state. And so we have people who get a bus pass because they're on the fixed route and they can go right to the plant. We have people who get on a paratransit trip because they're from a different area. We have people who are getting shuttles from different places because there's a conglomeration of people that we can move collectively. So the paratransit drivers who delivered Meals on Wheels said it was incredibly fulfilling when they would hear seniors say, "You're the only person I saw yesterday, and thank you for being so kind, and thank you for being a good friend during this crisis." Our drivers were really willing to go the extra mile and to do things that weren't their normal routine, including cleaning buses and cleaning facilities. So if you weren't driving on the paratransit side, you might be fogging the buses. And we put in 200 extra hours per day cleaning the buses and cleaning our facilities to make sure that everyone is safe and secure. And that's all because of the great work that the employees here were willing to change and to do a lot of other things that they weren't normally doing.
It's incredible, incredible work. And Scott, I want to give you just a quick minute, if you will, to mention the pilot program in Central Falls.
Yeah, this one's very exciting. And Mary Lou, I'm pushing Mayor Grebian to be the next one in this project. But working with Mayor Diosa, we talked about in Central Falls, what is the impediment to people being able to take transit? Is it money? Is it service? I mean, so we have pretty good service in Central Falls. And so working with the city, we applied for an FTA grant to basically geofence the entire city of Central Falls in the WAVE application. So when you get that app, if you board a bus in Central Falls, not yet because we have to, it's not operational yet, but if you board a bus in Central Falls and you have your WAVE app, you won't pay for your trip at all. So you'll be, anyone in Central Falls that's eligible for the program will be able to ride for free. And it's so innovative to be able to say, okay, let's do a whole year of this program and let's look at trends and let's see about what does this mean. And it's so important when the Central Falls and Pawtucket train station and bus hub comes online to have people taking RIPTA to that bus hub and transit center and train station every day, rather than having cars surface parking all over the place. And when you look at, if we can start in Central Falls and then expand it out to Pawtucket, you can look at ways that a small amount of city resources from Central Falls was matched with the FTA grant, and it's going to be I think a big game changer for the whole city. And an ability to say, okay, let's look at transit in a different way. It's not just the normal way that we used to think about things. There are innovative projects that are going on all over the place. The Comprehensive Community Action Program received another FTA grant to do a program where we will provide people trips to go to job training, to go to wellness checks with their doctor, to go work on a resume, to get to their job once we get them a job. So there are lots of innovations that are happening all over the country that we're seeking not to reinvent the wheel, but to take what they've done really well and to just keep improving it as we go forward.
Incredible. Thank you so much for talking about that, because I think all eyes are on that project right now. It's so innovative and it's exciting. You know,
I think it's great that we're all looking out of, trying to look outside the box, to be creative. That's awesome.
Well, and think about it, if Central Falls is a success and we can demonstrate that there's a need. So one of the things that I try to do is say, at our highest point last year, we were moving 58,000 people a day. At our lowest point, once the COVID crisis hit, we were moving about 14,000 people a day. And when we surveyed those 14,000 people, we found out that the vast majority of them are transit dependent citizens, right? They are residents that have no other option. So they can't jump in a car and just go where they want at that point. So we need to look at those numbers of saying there are 15,000 people who, because most businesses were closed, were either going to work in hospitals, in doctor's office, in pharmacies. They needed to get to work to take care of everybody that they take care of, and we needed to get them there. And so when we look at those kind of numbers, and now when we can get the data out of Central Falls, I think it gives us an ability to show how vital transit can be in a community, especially when we're in a crisis.
Yeah.
And like I said before, I'm really hoping this is the first of many more conversations about transportation equity, because there's so much to be learned by this. I hope maybe in a year from now, Scott, we can talk about how that pilot program went.
Absolutely.
And, all of our educational outreach folks at AAA would love nothing more than to join up with yours and, get across the state and talk about things like Uber Easy to get a lift along with the travel training. So I look forward to working with your team more.
Oh,
but thank you. I want to be respectful of your time because I know you have another meeting right after this.
I think the next one is Google Teams, so it'll be a different forum. I'll have squares across the bottom instead of just 4. So
But I think, our mission, when we look at Rhode Island's growing population of older adults, by 2040, we'll have a 75% increase from just 10 years ago. It's incredible. So we really need to start planning now around transportation at the local level as well. I just want to open it up to any final comments from all of you.
I think one of the takeaways from all of this is, transportation for all of us, but particularly as we grow older, it's not just about getting from point A to point B. It's the human encounter that happens all along the way. Just the importance of and Scott spoke so beautifully about the drivers that we do have and how they really stepped up. Just what an incredible necessary resource drivers are, and how we really need to build up that resource. And I think as a state, really appreciate the role that they play, and hold that up.
You could have a bus driver's day, driver love day.
You should.
Oh, they would love that.
We really do. Let's get on that, guys.
Okay, I'm there.
And the other thing I would say is the embracing the new technology. We're also working on a pilot right now called One Click, One Call, where the goal will be, of course, there's really not a lot of Uber and Lyft trips at the moment, but the goal would be that when you call in to ride to go from point A to point B, they will have an ability to say, okay, it's really not effective for us to do that. It is cheaper to have an Uber come pick that person up, but the individual won't have to do it differently. They won't have to go out there and do it themselves. It'll all be done automatically to say, here are the options that you can pick from. This is the best one for you. That embracing the technology along with the human commitment from the drivers, I think can go a long way in making people feel very safe and secure when they're traveling.
Now that's an efficient system, and absolutely, quality of life is paramount here. And I think that's what we all learn the deeper we dig into this issue. So thank you all so very much. There's also a ton of resources on Age Friendly Rhode Island's website, including the Virtual Community Center, which is statewide, offering tons of education. So agefriendlyri.org.
Thank you.
Great place to go. And Catherine, the points phone number one more time.
462-4444.
Great.
And if anyone is tuning in from their community, do reach out to your community center or senior center, because many of us are still open. We're doing, or really never closed. We're just doing things differently, remotely. And, a lot of it's being done by phone, which is a challenge. But do reach out, because each community has its own resources.
And I will add that at the agefriendlyri.org on our website, there's a full listing of all the senior centers statewide and their contact information. And so, yes, please go there and connect at the local level. They're amazing places.
All right. Thank you all so very much. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will talk again.
Okay.
They will.
Thanks, Diana.
Yeah.